The silence in the car was suffocating, thick with unspoken words and tension. Grayson's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles turning white as he kept his eyes focused on the road ahead. Beside him, Ethan sat rigid, arms crossed, throwing death glares in his direction every few seconds. Matthew, sitting next to me in the back seat, wasn't any better. His body was tense, radiating protective energy like a barrier between me and Grayson. But none of that mattered. My eyes were locked on Grayson. I watched him, searching for something, anything, that would explain what was happening right now. Why he had come. Why, after everything, he had shown up at my doorstep, alone, without his usual entourage of security guards, or his menacing thugs lurking in the shadows. It made no sense. This wasn't the Grayson I knew. The man I knew had sent me away like I was nothing, like I was just another disposable part of his life. He had practically pushed me out of his world, making me feel like I didn't matter. And yet, here he was, calm, composed, and driving me somewhere, God knows where, with no one else but my brothers breathing down his neck. Ethan shifted in his seat, cutting his eyes toward me, his protective instincts flaring up with every glance Grayson stole in the rearview mirror. I could feel the weight of my brothers' anger, their distrust of the man behind the wheel, and I didn't blame them. Not after what he had put me through. But despite the tension radiating from them, my mind was fixated on him. On Grayson. I still couldn't believe it. He had come here, to the UK, just to see me, to make peace with my brothers no less, knowing full well that they would sooner break his bones than allow him back into my life. And he had done it without any backup. Without the army of men he usually kept around. That, more than anything, unsettled me. The fact that he had walked into a lion's den on his own, unarmed, vulnerable. It wasn't like him. What was his endgame? What was going on in that head of his? The car hit a bump in the road, jolting me from my thoughts. I glanced at Ethan, whose death stare at Grayson hadn't wavered for a second. "You know this doesn't change anything, right?" he said, his voice low but laced with anger. "You think just showing up like this will make up for what you did to her?" Grayson didn't respond, his jaw clenching as he kept his eyes forward, the muscles in his neck tensed, but he didn't react to Ethan's words. The silence stretched on, heavy and oppressive. My heart pounded as I watched Grayson, still searching for any signs of the man I used to know, the man who had held my heart in his hands only to crush it. But he didn't look angry. He didn't look like he was here to fight. He just looked resolute, like he had made up his mind about something. And it scared me. What had changed in him? What had made him come all this way after sending me away? Like I was worthless. I hadn't mattered to him before, so why now? Was this some kind of game to him, or was there something more? The questions swirled in my mind, and the more I thought about it, the more confused I became. Ethan let out a frustrated huff, throwing another pointed look at Grayson. "I'm not letting you hurt her again," he said, his voice tight with warning. "You come near her, and I swear to God—" "Ethan, enough," I cut in, surprising myself with the sharpness in my tone. My brother turned. To me, his eyes softening, but the protective edge was still there. "I can handle this," I added, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. Grayson's eyes flickered briefly in the rearview mirror, meeting mine for a split second, before he returned his focus to the road. That brief moment was enough to make my heart stutter, but I refused to let him see how much his presence still affected me. The car turned sharply, and I blinked in surprise as we entered the driveway of the most lavish hotel in the city. Its grandeur was overwhelming, towering high above us with shimmering glass and gold accents that spoke of wealth and excess. Ethan's anger melted away for a moment, replaced by awe as he stared out the window. I almost choked back a laugh at the sudden shift in his demeanour. But Matthew's excitement was palpable, his eyes wide as he took in the opulence around us. As the car came to a stop in front of the entrance, a man in a burgundy uniform rushed over, opening the door for Grayson. By the time he stepped out, Ethan and Matthew were already out of the car, following him like shadows. I hesitated for just a second, then joined them, my heart pounding in anticipation of what lay ahead. Grayson led the way through the expansive lobby, the interiors gleaming with elegance and the scent of fresh flowers filling the air. Employees greeted him with polite smiles, calling out, "Welcome, Mr. Anderson." He brushed past them as if they were nothing but furniture, a move that felt rude but was so typical of him. He approached an older man close to his father's age, who rushed over with a warm smile. "Get them each a VIP room," Grayson ordered, his voice steady and commanding. "No," Ethan interjected, the defiance back in his tone. "We're going with you both." "Yeah, this isn't happening," Matthew chimed in, crossing his arms as he stared at Grayson, with a serious expression. I stepped forward, my frustration boiling over. "No, you two need to stop. Grayson and I need to talk, alone, like privately." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I was tired of the protective bubble my brothers had put me in. Ethan and Matthew exchanged incredulous looks as if I had just suggested we fly to the moon. "Ariana, you can't be serious," Ethan said, his tone incredulous. "I am serious," I replied, my heart racing. "If I don't get to talk to him alone, then I won't be able to sort through any of this. You both need to trust me." Grayson watched the exchange silently, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might protest, but instead he merely leaned against the wall, arms crossed, waiting for my brothers to make their decision. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Grayson, then back at me. The tension hung thick in the air as he weighed his options. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. "Fine," he relented, shooting Grayson another death glare. "But if anything goes wrong—" "It won't," I interrupted firmly, my gaze steady. I had to believe that. "Fine," Ethan said, his tone still edged with fury. "But you're putting us in one room, and it better be closer to theirs." Grayson straightened, a flicker of approval crossing his face. He turned to the old man who had been waiting patiently. "Do that," he instructed, his voice steady and commanding. As Grayson reached for me, intending to touch my arm, Ethan reacted quickly, swatting his hand away. "Not like that," he added sharply, a protective fire burning in his eyes. The atmosphere crackled with tension as I shot Ethan a warning glance, my heart racing. It felt like we were teetering on the edge of a precipice, and I needed to regain control before everything spiraled out of hand. The old man led us into the elevator, his demeanour calm and professional as he pressed the button for the top floor. The elevator hummed softly, the smooth motion contrasted by the tension in the air. When the elevator came to a stop on the designated floor, the old man turned and gestured for Ethan and Matthew to follow him. "You two are getting out here," he said, casting a quick glance back at them. "Why are we the only ones getting out?" Ethan asked, his brow furrowed with suspicion. The old man smiled politely. "This is the last floor before Mr. Anderson's penthouse." I noticed the hesitation in their eyes, the protective instinct flaring as they exchanged worried glances. Sensing their reluctance, I gently pushed them out. "You two need to stop being annoying and get out," I said firmly, my voice leaving little room for argument. As the elevator doors slid shut, sealing Ethan and Matthew out, I felt my heart race, the sudden solitude amplifying my anxiety. Neither Grayson nor I spoke. The air felt electric, charged with unspoken words. Without looking at him, I broke the silence, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you were taking me back to the US." Before he could respond, the elevator dinged and opened, revealing a grand floor that felt more like a mansion terrace than a hotel suite. Luxurious furnishings and intricate decor surrounded us, a stunning view of the city skyline through expansive windows, but I forced myself to suppress my awe. This wasn't about the lavishness of his world. It was about the conversation we needed to have. Grayson stepped out first, his presence commanding as he led me inside. The elegance of the space felt like a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that lay ahead. This was my chance to end whatever tenuous relationship I thought we had. The moment the door closed behind us, Grayson turned to me with an intensity that took my breath away. "I missed you so much," he said, his voice low and urgent. Before I could process his words, he closed the distance between us in a swift, decisive motion. His lips crashed against mine, pulling me into a deep kiss that stole the breath from my lungs. My mind went blank, every rational thought scattering like leaves in the wind. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. His hands cradled my face, the warmth of his touch sending a shiver down my spine. I melted into him, my fingers tangling in his hair, gripping him as if he might disappear. My hands instinctively found his chest, feeling the warmth of his body through the fabric of his shirt. My body betrayed me as my lips responded to his, matching his intensity. Every rational thought that had been racing through my mind vanished, replaced by the overwhelming need that swirled within me. I kissed him back, desperately, hungrily, as if the world outside of us didn't exist. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound echoing in my ears as my fingers curled tighter in his hair, pulling him closer. The days of hurt, confusion, and anger seemed to dissolve in the heat of this moment, consumed by the sparks that ignited between us. But beneath the passion, a knot of guilt tightened in my chest. I had promised myself I'd handle this, promised my brothers that I wouldn't fall back into his arms so easily. And yet, here I was, lost in him, lost in his heat, in the unbidden desires that he awakened in me, in the way my body responded to his touch as if it had been waiting for this. Grayson growled low in his throat, the sound primal and full of possessive hunger. His hand slid down my back, and in one swift motion he lifted me off the ground. I gasped, clinging to him, my legs wrapping around his waist without a second thought. The sudden sensation of being weightless, of being entirely at his mercy, only fueled the heat coursing through my veins. He moved with purpose, carrying me across the room with easy strength, his mouth never leaving mine. Each step was a declaration, a promise that he wouldn't let go this time, no matter what it took. The world around us blurred, my senses overwhelmed by the press of his body and the steady thrum of desire that pulsed between us. I barely registered the softness of the bed beneath me as he laid me down, following me. Down, his weight pressing me into the mattress. His lips were relentless, insistent, as if letting go would mean losing me forever. His hands moved to cradle my face again, his thumb brushing over my cheek as his kisses grew more fervent, more demanding. My heart hammered wildly, the sensation of his heat, his strength, his raw need enveloping me in a cocoon of urgency and longing. I knew I should stop, should push him away, should make him answer for the pain he'd caused me. But all I could think about was him, his touch, his lips, the way he fit against me like he was the only thing that made sense in a world that had fallen apart. His lips traced a fiery path from my mouth to my jaw, then down the curve of my neck, each kiss igniting my skin and quickening my pulse. I arched into him, my body responding without hesitation, instinct overriding reason. My fingers wove into his hair, tugging him closer, urging him on. A deep, guttural sound rumbled from his chest, vibrating against my body as he pressed his forehead to mine, our breaths mingling in a heady mix of desire and desperation. A soft moan escaped my lips as his mouth continued its descent, trailing heat along the sensitive skin of my neck. My hands roamed his back, clutching him as if he were my anchor, the only thing keeping me grounded in the whirlwind of sensation. Rational thoughts flickered weakly, begging me to stop, to pull away, but I was already lost. My heart, my body, they betrayed me, surrendering fully to the undeniable connection we still shared, letting the fire between us consume every last thread of resistance. His hand slid under my blouse, fingers grazing my skin until they reached my breast. The sensation jolted me back to reality, and I froze. My mind was screaming, "Stop!" But my body was trapped in a haze of desire. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, his other hand pressing harder against my waist, holding me in place. "Please stay," he murmured, his voice rough with desperation. "Don't push me away. Don't. Leave me." His hand slipped beneath the fabric of my bra, fingers brushing my breast, sending a shock. Through my body, but not the kind I wanted. My breath hitched as I grabbed his wrist, trying to stop him. "Grayson, this isn't right," I said, my voice shaky. "We shouldn't be doing this." He ignored me, his fingers teasing my nipple, sending sparks of unwanted pleasure. Shooting through me as his mouth trailed down my neck again, his kisses more insistent, as if possessed by something beyond reason. My heart pounded wildly, fear mixing with confusion as I pushed against his chest. "Grayson, stop." He barely budged, his hand still moving as he pleaded again. "Please don't go, I need you." A wave of sheer panic overtook me, and I shoved him with all my strength, breaking the contact between us. "Stop," I yelled, my voice shaking. His hand stilled, but he didn't move away, still hovering above me, begging with his eyes. Desperation clung to him like a shadow. In one swift motion, I reached out and slapped him, the sharp crack of the impact cutting through the tension like a knife. The force of it made him freeze, his head turning slightly to the side, and when his eyes slowly came back to meet mine, my heart stopped. For a moment, fear gripped me tightly, paralyzing me with the thought that he might do something terrible in retaliation. But instead he blinked, the wild look in his eyes dimming as he slowly pulled back, the realization of what had just happened sinking in. "Oh shit," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. He moved off me, giving me space. But I stayed there, stunned, my heart thundering wildly in my chest. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, the weight of what almost happened settling over me like a suffocating blanket. A second passed, then another. I jolted upright, adjusting my bra with trembling hands, pulling my blouse back into place. My fingers were clumsy, my breath shallow, but I forced myself to sit up and compose myself. Neither of us spoke. Grayson remained still, his gaze fixed on the floor as his fingers repeatedly raked through his hair, a silent gesture of frustration, while I smoothed the fabric over my chest, trying to stop the tremors that racked my body. I stood up, trying to steady myself, the silence between us growing heavier by the second. I opened my mouth, ready to break the tense air, but Grayson beat me to it. "I'm sorry for what just happened," he began, his voice rough, almost hesitant. "It wasn't intentional." He cleared his throat as if searching for the right words. I just couldn't control myself. And I almost..." "It's okay," I interrupted, swallowing the knot of emotions lodged in my throat. "I'm to blame, too. I led you on." My own voice wavered, and I cleared my throat, steeling myself before asking, "So, why are you really here? I heard you brought your wife Skylar back. So, what do you want with me?" Grayson shifted, his jaw tightening for a second before he spoke. I'm here to take you back. With me, he said, then quickly added, I mean, only if you want. What I mean is, are you kidding me? I cut him off, my frustration flaring. Do you want me or not? Which is it? You don't even seem to know the real reason. I let out a heavy breath, trying to regain control. Look, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. So, go back to the US, to your wife. Grayson's eyes darkened and he interrupted me sharply. I don't have a wife. I furrowed my brow, confusion cutting through my anger. He took a step forward, trying to close the distance between us, but I quickly raised my hand, palm out, halting him in his tracks. I divorced her, he said, his tone steady, almost defiant. The woman I want is you. I want to make you my wife, and illegally.